Okay, so welcome. My name is Hanako O'Leary, and I am the artist who worked on this body of work, Izanami. So I'll just start. I am a Japanese-American sculptor and ceramic artist. I'm here to tell you about the story of Izanami and the work in the museum. But before I do, I wanted to start by providing a quick history about my family, as culture and heritage play a big role in my work. So my mother, as you can tell from my name, my mother is Japanese, and my father is a US guy from the Midwest. Like many of us born and raised in the US, I grew up in a multicultural household. And while I attended school every day in the Chicago suburbs, once I came home, I took off my shoes, spoke Japanese, and ate with chopsticks. While my Japaneseness and talking about matriarchy and my mother is very present in my work, and I often only credit my dad simply as father from the Midwest, I wanted to emphasize that I have been extremely lucky to have been raised by my two parents who both value the multicultural identities of their children. They both worked extremely hard to maintain the connection to our Japanese roots, even while living in the United States. My dad wasn't able to make it today, but he will be watching the recording. And my mom is here in the audience, so before I get officially into my talk, I just wanted to say, thanks, Mom and Dad, for making it possible to be an artist and be here today and make the kind of art that I do. So, for the first 18 years of my life, I would spend the school year living in the States and my summers in Japan. My mother would take my siblings and I back to live with extended family in her hometown, a small rural island called Osaki Kamijima, set in the Seto Inlet Sea of Japan. There, I got to spend 3 months of the year with my 4 aunts, who are in this picture. So at the bottom left is my mom and her 4 sisters, Atsuko, Nobuko, Nagako, and Masako. Through cooking, cleaning, and visiting temples and shrines together, I got to understand their own individual ideas of feminine strength and integrity. So, all this background to say that I have a very strong Japanese roots and heritage, but I am a United States American artist, and that's why my artwork looks the way it does. I use a very strong Japanese aesthetic in my art to represent my experience as a North American woman, but this work is not a critique on Japanese culture. It's a perspective of Western feminism by a Japanese American artist. And this is just an old photo of my dad's side of the family, the O'Learys. Shout out to the O'Learys, who are also here. So fast forward. In 2012, I moved to Seattle after graduating college in Illinois, and I consider that to be the official start of my career as an artist. Here, I learned about the Hanya mask while working one of my first jobs as an intern at the Japanese Cultural and Community Center of Washington. The Hanya mask is an important symbol to me and something I use over and over again in my work. Traditionally used in No theater, the Hanya mask represents women who have been possessed with jealousy, rage, and/or heartbreak. It is believed that they are so overcome with emotions that their soul prematurely leaves their body and their mortal flesh are left to roam on the earth hungry for revenge. In No theater, all actors on stage wear masks. Depending on the lighting and gesture of the actor, the Hanya may appear to be angry, sad, or overcome with hysterical laughter. Within the many traditions of No mask making, it is believed that in order to be able to carve a Hanya mask, The mask maker must be extremely wise and skilled because only those with the most life experience could possibly understand the full range of female suffering. So when I first rediscovered this image, I was shocked to learn that it was the face of a woman. I've seen the image of a Hanya over and over again throughout my life, but I only knew it from Western video games and tattoos worn on men's bodies. It was fascinating to me that in the long patrilineal lines of Noh theater, mask making, and storytelling, the most terrifying adversary that could appear to a female or to a male protagonist was an angry woman. And usually he was the one who pissed her off to begin with. After learning about this image, I began making art that spoke to my experience as an East Asian American woman. As I work with her, I take the Hanya image back from the male-dominated theater traditions that birthed her and our North American pop cultural appropriations of her that use her for profit. The intention of my artwork has always been to challenge myself and other women to exist outside the limited scope of what society has constructed for us as acceptable versions of womanhood. Through my work, I speak to what it's actually like to be a Hanya, an angry woman, or perhaps more accurately, a powerful one. So a few years later, in 2018, I began this series, Izanami, that you see here today. Izanami, meaning she who invites, is the Shinto goddess of creation and death. Shinto is Japan's state religion, officially, but it is also used as an umbrella term to reference the many local belief systems practiced by Japanese people in villages throughout Japan before the introduction of Buddhism from China, which kind of introduced this idea of one official text of religion. Izanami's story is first documented in the Kojiki as part of the original history of Japan, written around the year 700. The Kojiki documents the ancestry of Japan's royalty leading back to the primordial gods Izanami and Izanagi. So, as the book states, according to legend, a long, long time ago at the beginning of time, the universe created Izanami and Izanagi, translated to mean she who invites and he who invites. They were the divine personification of the feminine and masculine. In order to build a home for themselves, Izanami instructed Izanagi to take his jeweled scepter and stir up the primordial goo of the cosmos. Izanagi followed Izanami's instructions and stirred. The primordial oceans frothed with bubbles. Out of the foam emerged the Japanese islands. Once the couple created a home, next they decided to create a family. So in the traditional mortal way, Izanami and Izanagi came together to procreate. Together they created many gods and goddesses, and for a while, everything was new and thriving, and Izanami was excited to create this new land full of life. But after years and years and years of just happy, sunny life, eventually Izanami grew tired of looking after the plants and the animals and all the new things that needed her attention to grow. She knew there was more to her than just existing on the surface with the birds and the flowers and wanted to create something new. She wanted something that would add contrast and challenge and value and depth to the bright and youthful world that was so easy. She decided to create a mountain bigger than any that has ever existed. When the day came to give birth to this new god, her body opened up, and from it was delivered dirt and stone in a brilliant burst of lava. As this new god of fire was born, Izanami's body burnt up, and her transformation into the goddess of death was initiated. Her soul was sent down into the underworld, and she became the first living being ever to experience death. Meanwhile, Izanagi became the first being to experience loss. Stricken with grief, he went looking for Izanami in the underworld. Deep down under the earth he ventured, and he found his way into Yomi, the land of darkness, a place where life ends and death begins and gets ready to be reborn again. The land of Yomi was dark and warm. The walls were wet and smelled of salty decay. Into the darkness, he called for Izanami. Izanami, where are you? I don't like this whole death thing. I need you to come back and be with me. There's so much to do in the land of the living, and I don't know how to do anything without you. Izanami, are you there? Do you hear me? Very faintly, he heard a voice in the distance. Izanagi, is that you? Wow, how long has it been? How is everybody? It's so nice of you to pop in unannounced like this and say hi, but I can't go back right now. I've already eaten the food of this land and become one with it. I know all this is scary and change is really hard, but I'm excited for this new realm I'm building, and I can't leave right now. Death is my new journey. Izanagi, being the divine masculine, could not accept no for an answer. Izanami. Izanami, you can't possibly be serious. You made a promise to be mine forever. And this is really triggering for my abandonment issues. I'm not leaving here without you. Izanami, being the divine feminine, was still learning how to maintain her boundaries. Okay, Izanagi, please don't get so upset. Let me see what I can do. You're really not supposed to be here unannounced, and you have the potential to cause a lot of harm, but I'm going to check, and maybe we can, rebalance the scales of the cosmos for you. Let me see if there's always room for compromise, right? While I look into it, it's really important that you sit still and wait for me. I'll be back as soon as I can, but in the meantime, please don't touch anything, don't move anything, and no matter what you do, please do not turn on the lights. Izanagi sighed and rolled his eyes. Sure, babe, you do you. I'll be right here, but don't take too long because there's also zero service down here. I don't know why you think it's so great. And with that, Izanami went off to people-please her way out of this conflict, while Izanagi sat around waiting for his wife to de-escalate his triggered nervous system. Eventually, his phone died. He had nothing left to occupy his mind. He started getting anxious. He was hungry. He's uncomfortable. So he thought to himself, this is ridiculous. Things should not take this long. I know Izanami thinks she knows what she's doing because I guess this whole realm was her concept and she kind of built and invented and discovered this place, but her divine feminine temperament is not cut out for leadership or negotiation or time management. I mean, look at this place. There's nothing here. I don't get it. It's time for me to step in as a divine masculine and exercise my superior skills of making shit happen. Izanagi stood up and removed a comb from his hair. And with a snap of his fingers, he set it on fire. Holding it in front of him as a torch, suddenly, the world around him was illuminated. He could see that indeed he stood in the land of the dead. All around him was death, blood, flesh, and gore in a continuous cycle of change. As he moved the flame around, he saw next to him lay the body of Izanami. No longer was Izanami his youthful lover, but a dead body, deep in the throes of decay. Her flesh saggy and wrinkled and pale, within her corpse, he saw the 7 gods of thunder and lightning eternally feeding off her womb. No longer in the mood to make shit happen, Izanagi slowly started backing away. And as if to sense his sudden change in moods, Izanami's undead body slowly became reanimated. She sat up with the serpents still writhing within her and looked at Izanagi. Izanagi, what have you done? I asked you so many times. Don't turn on the lights. Izanagi answered as he continued to slowly back away. Oof, wow, I'm so sorry, babe, but you were just taking a really long time. But it's okay because I'm actually really glad you gave me this time to, sit and reflect and, just do the work. And actually, it turns out you were right the whole time. We need to be on our own journey right now. You have your journey, Queen of the Undead, you got those snake things to take care of, and I have mine, as the glorious patriarch of the Japanese pantheon. We need to spend some time apart, I think. Yeah, I think this is a good time right now to initiate one of those, what the kids are calling those no contact phases. Let's do that. So Izanagi turned and started running towards the exit. Izanami, seeing her lover for the coward that he really is, finally found the strength to demand for some accountability. Izanagi, you've disrespected my memory and disturbed the peace of this land that is so precious to me. I demand that you stay here and put in the work to repair this mess. Izanami gathered her new underworld friends, known in historical texts only as the Hell Hags, and quickly began to catch up to Izanagi. But Izanagi had access to undisclosed privileges that allowed him to dodge their grasps, and he was able to step out of the underworld with just enough time to roll the boulder over the exit, blocking her from him. Izanami, he lamented as he leaned on the boulder. I just want you to know that, it's not you, it's me. It was really fun while it lasted, though, and I'll never forget you. You're an incredible woman. After a minute, Izanami replied, that's really funny you say that, because it actually is you. You have no idea the disrespect and harm you unleash on this land. You're free to go. Go live your life as you please, because so will I. From this day forward, every day, I will take 1,000 lives from this realm that we created together to serve this new one that I'm building. Izanagi, in a flustered rage, answered, Wow, Izanami, wow, really? Is that really how you're gonna end this? I'm so sorry you're upset, but maybe I wouldn't have to block you if you weren't so crazy and low-key really clingy. You know what? Take as many souls as you need. I don't need them. I'm the eternal God. I'm the eternal golden pretty boy. I am the God of life. I have all of creation on my side, and history will forever be written to support me. With my endless resources, I can create 1,500 souls every day to replace the ones you take and to replace you. The world will forever be ashamed of your unpleasantness, your difficultness, and your ugliness in this new icky realm that you're building, and eternally grateful for my gracious victory. After a very long silence, Izanami finally replied. Izanami, my people and I have built this sacred land and history within us that will live on for eternity. And while you refuse to understand or respect it, it terrifies you when we choose to exercise our powers in ways that do not serve you or your identity or you getting ahead. And because you cannot exist without us, you insist our power is yours to control. I cannot stop you from centering yourself in this story, but know that I am also a God, and I will also continue to live and be loved and enjoy an extraordinary existence without you. So good luck, goodbye, see ya. And after that, the two walked separate ways and never looked back. According to the ancient text, feeling polluted by all the rejection and negative energy, Izanagi went to the ocean and washed his body, cleaning himself from the filth of the underworld. As he washed himself, he began to weep beautiful, sensitive, manly tears. And from his tears was born the sun goddess Amaterasu, who would bear him many grandchildren. They would grow up to begin the imperial bloodline of Japan and keep him company and honor him as the first father of Japan and eternal patriarch of the Shinto pantheon. So in this Kojiki, the story of Izanami ends at the boulder. Izanami plays this role as father to new gods and is an active character in many stories following this one, while Izanami is never mentioned again. But in any story, when a character breaks free from the role that they are supposed to play and begins to embody who they actually want to be, that's when the story gets interesting. 5 years ago, when I started this series, I still did not know about Izanami. It was 2018, 2 years into the Trump presidency, and I had just experienced an unwanted pregnancy that resulted in an abortion amidst constant talk of restricting our reproductive rights. It was a time when people all over the world took to the streets to participate in women's marches and then went to Facebook as their main platform to communicate their thoughts and opinions on how they felt about pink pussy hats. These timelines were also flooded with graphs and data counting how many women from which demographic caused this by voting for the wrong person. And all I could see was a world that hated women and blamed them for everything. I felt so much anger. I was desperately looking for a way to process it. And that's when I ran into Resistance Auntie. So for those of you who may remember, yes, claps for Resistance Auntie. For those of you who may remember, or for those of you who don't know, Resistance Auntie is Anita Yavich, an Asian American woman, she's also a professor, who attended Trump's inauguration when he first stepped into office. During his whole speech, she stood tall in a purple parka with her hands held high in a middle finger gesture, not moving once, not breaking her sternness. And she immediately became a viral meme and icon for many Asian women, including myself. At the time, I was studying Buddhist sculptures and in particular was attracted to their beautiful hand gestures. Known as mudras, the hands symbolize various prayers and mantras. And so I began to think, if there were ever a mudra that represented how I feel, how we are all feeling towards each other, this is the one. And so I made this first piece in the series just purely in the memory of Resistance Auntie. And at the time I called it my anger jar, but eventually I would name her Venus Jar 1. While making my second piece, I began to think about the meaning behind the middle finger. Why is it that when we feel anger towards someone, we give them this gesture and yell, "Fuck you"? The more I thought about it, the more disturbed I felt to know that as a society, we've normalized signaling gestures of sexual aggression towards each other to express our anger. And on top of that, the gesture of the middle finger used in this way suggests that it is somehow demeaning to be on the receiving end of sexual intercourse. Can the middle finger not be used to represent our demand for pleasure? It made me realize we live in a phallocentric world that is terrified of being penetrated and unable to comprehend the value of pleasure and power without the presence of a phallus. I began to use these hand gestures not only as a symbol for my own anger, but to challenge this fear and heteropatriarchal views of sexual intimacy and pleasure. As the series progressed, I began researching the history of clay vessels and their connection to human spirituality from the beginning of human civilization. It is at this point that I began to study what archaeologists call the Jomon Venus, ancient clay fertility idols found in archaeological sites all over Japan. While it is clear to me that these forms represent women and must have held some great cultural importance, the gender and spiritual significance of these forms and the possibility of them originating from a matriarchal culture are still constantly contested in many academic circles. This made me curious about the role women played in spiritual practices of Japan. So I started just Googling more, and I discovered the story of the shamaness queen Himiko, who is believed to be the first leader to unite the many small warring clans of ancient Japan. Early historical texts from China dating back to 297 describe her ascendance to the throne as such. This is a quote. The country formerly had a man as ruler. For some 70 or 80 years after that, there were disturbances and warfare. Thereupon, the people agreed upon a woman for their ruler. Her name was Himiko. She occupied herself with magic and sorcery, bewitching the people. Though mature in age, she remained unmarried. She had a younger brother who assisted her in ruling the country. After she became the ruler, there were few who saw her. She had 1,000 women as attendants, but only one man. He served her food and drink and acted as a medium of communication. She resided in a palace surrounded by towers and stockades with armed guards and in a constant state of vigilance. End quote. So while many Chinese and Korean histories mention this queen and describe her very similarly, she is still not formally recognized in Japan's imperial bloodline because not enough scholars believe that she was a real person, even though they have no problem accepting Amaterasu, who was born from a man's teardrop, as the first mother of all emperors. So it was here that I began researching the history of Japan and found the story of Izanami. I thought it was interesting that cultures all over the world have a story about a man who followed his girlfriend into the underworld trying to save her, but would inevitably fail because he couldn't follow a simple set of instructions. Yet, this very mediocre character is always celebrated as a hero, and we see versions of his story over and over and over again across hundreds of years. Why would a whole religion name a woman as their primordial mother and queen of life and death, but have no stories about her once she transforms into the queen of death, which is an essential part of the human existence? Why is it so hard to believe a woman like Himiko, who appears in official historical texts in multiple countries, including the one she's from, be acknowledged as a real historical person? Why do we continue to dig up ceremonial objects of worship depicting women's bodies, but refuse to believe there may have once existed many cultures that revolved around a matriarchy? Why do we continue to pass up the fascinating stories of these very incredible mythical women? So I decided to take upon, to use my best way of creating and communicating, which is clay, to fill this gap in the narrative. I wanted to know what happened to Izanami after she turned around and walked away from that boulder. Izanami's world and her fully realized power remain unknown to us because the voices that are allowed to carry on these stories have never held an underworld of their own. They don't believe it exists unless they can center themselves in the story. And like the Hanya mask, these women who defy the narrative that they were meant to fit into can only be understood as villains and monsters in our current culture. I created this body of work imagining Izanami's untold, or perhaps more accurately, forgotten story. Each of these vessels represents an uncelebrated realm of femininity that Izanami must discover as she journeys through the underworld. Much like the mysteries of the ancient Jomon Venus figurines, their histories and spiritual significance have been forgotten and must be rebuilt. Each mask represents the women who have helped her along the way to navigate her journey of self-discovery. I call them battle masks because to live and grow as a woman is to constantly navigate and survive misogyny. We have to navigate the internalized misogyny we hold for ourselves and each other with grace and dedication. And we have to survive in this world that thrives and prospers off the oppression of femininity and the harm that is imposed on our bodies. They're inspired by the Hanya mask I love so dearly and celebrate the beauty and power of what we are so often told is monstrous, ugly, and shameful. Lastly, the spirit wall was built in honor of the Hell Hags, who helped Izanami chase her toxic ex out of the underworld. They represent the many facets of femininity that do not get to shine in patrilineal storytelling, the infiniteness of womanhood and feminine identity. Much like the womb holds all of human history, as women, we hold every version of ourselves that we have ever been and every version that we allow ourselves to be from today and onward. And so this story does not end here, and Izanami does not just exist in one underworld, because we can see her all over history, like with women, secret, forgotten, unlegit women like Himiko, or these Jomon Venuses, or viral memes like Resistance Auntie. They exist before us, and she will continue after us. So I hope that each one of us can carry a piece of her story and find our way to tell it. So that concludes the talk. Thanks. Before I open it up to questions, well, first I just wanted to thank my VIP front row, who are all various forms of Izanami in my life and help me walk away from this boring boulder. I also have slides for each piece from the series. So while it is my intention to, I'm going to continue this work, and I want to eventually have an actual written story for Izanami and her rebuilding of the underworld. Right now, what I have is these pieces that I've built, thinking about what that would look like. And so if any of you want to hear more specific explanations behind each piece, feel free to ask me and we can talk about that, or you can just ask me general questions about the presentation. So with the spirit masks, there's 320 on view. So far to date, I think I've made somewhere around like 640. But my goal is to make 1,200, just because I find that 12 is a number used in a lot of cultures as like to symbolize completeness. And so, and it also felt like a big thing to try to go after. And so, yeah, eventually there'll be 1,200. For now, the ones that you see are new ones that I made for the exhibition. I think about half of them are new, and then about half of them have been returned to me or on loan from people who have bought them throughout the years.
I'm really touched by the piece, My Mother's, and approaching that, I feel like I can already sense some of the meaning, but I'd love to hear you talk about the parts of the myth that have come together for you so far.
Yeah, so this piece, My Mother's, is was made thinking about like matriarchal heritage and like relationships we have with our mothers. I think you know, the idea of your mom is just like a huge presence in your life, and it's like it's so big, it's easy also for it to go wrong. And we just inherit so much from mother figures, or you know, the absence of mother figures. And so I wanted to create a piece that symbolized kind of this like ongoing generation after generation that continues to build up and build the next one while the current one slowly starts to melt back into the earth. And while I was making it, I was kind of thinking about the idea of what we inherit as being a gift and a burden. And so with this piece in particular, I got to take it to it was called like a Hungry Ghost Festival. It was like an API festival during the summer. And so before I finally fired it, I had people who came, I had like a little altar set up, and I had people write on little cards gifts that they've inherited and burdens that they want to let go. So things that they want to pass on and things that they want to let go from their mother line. And then they stuck notes in it, and I fired it in the kiln. So if you actually look at this, it looks like there's a bunch of dust in there, but they're actually ashes of people's notes. Yeah.
So I noticed and knowing your work as well, I think it'd be interesting to hear you talk about your use of porcelain.
So the porcelain pieces, I believe, are 4, and this one. So porcelain is one of those like, I don't know, it's like an A-list clay is how I like to look at it. There's a lot of preciousness attached to it. People use it in like fine china, and it gets expensive pretty fast. But it's also kind of revered as this medium that's like hard to work with because it's so smooth and glassy, which is what makes it so attractive. And so I kind of wanted to just challenge myself with it to build a giant sculpture, which you're like specifically not supposed to do with porcelain, because it's so sensitive. The reason why you get this like very pristine surface is because it's a glassier clay. And so when you start to really like build these irregular forms, once you put it in the heat, it'll start to like melt and rest and kind of like take on a shape of its own. And so I wanted to just use it to challenge myself really, but in this piece in particular, which is my biggest, and it's made out of porcelain, and I'm kind of proud of being able to pull it off, but I was thinking about the importance of emotional intelligence, which is kind of like for a lot of women all we have to get ahead, because especially when you live in like more violent places, you kind of just have to be able to talk your way out of situations or talk your way up into better places, and also like become highly sensitive all of the time of the temperature of everyone else's feelings around you. And so I think while that's an incredible skill, it's also highly undervalued, and it also takes like a huge toll on you physically. And so I thought like all of those ideas and how building this giant kind of like stuffed balloon egg shape of all of this capacity to hold and navigate other people's feelings is like a tremendous asset, but also can be incredibly painful.
I also noticed with some of the newer pieces that you're using like gold gilding, or is it gold leafing?
It's called gold luster, but yeah.
Okay. And so there's a history of that in, I believe, in Japanese ceramics, correct, for fixing pieces. But I also noticed that you use it in areas where the sensuality of the vulva, the clitoris, the labia, like that these areas are also gilded. And so I'm wondering about like, I feel like something that we're not really like talking about with your work is also like the sexuality, like the pleasure, and that sort of element. So you're obviously drawing our attention. At least I feel like you're drawing our attention towards sort of like the pleasure zone as well as sort of like the relationship between motherhood and femininity and womanhood. And so can you talk about like, how you're using that gilding, sorry, I'm using the wrong word again, but the luster,
Yeah.
the gold luster,
Means the same thing.
are you speaking to that Japanese tradition, to the ceramic tradition, and how does that all link into like the conceptual realms around like the sexuality that
Sure.
the vagina's bringing
Yeah.
into the discussion?
Yeah, they're kind of like two separate concepts. The one you're talking about of repairing things with gold, that's I don't know that it was invented in Japan, but I know the Japanese do it very well and everyone loves it. It's called kintsugi. It's basically when you have a broken piece of pottery and you glue it back together with like a lacquer, but then you put gold leaf on top of it. So there's this like golden crack that gives this once broken and worthless piece even more value. And I do use that a lot in my pieces. I mean, from a very practical stance that like I will spend months on a sculpture and like a little finger breaks off and what, now it's worthless? No, I'm just gonna kintsugi it because it deserves that. And also my labor deserves that. But I also like to use gold luster to, I guess also like, again, like, cause we associate so much value when we see shiny, sparkly things and golden things. And so, but we hold so little value for vaginas, vulvas, like that part of the female anatomy. You know, all these other parts of our bodies are like bought and sold as supposed to be desirable, but somehow the part that actually runs our sense of desire and pleasure is like worthless somehow, or even more, it's like shameful. And so I like to use gold to highlight, you know, like certain like body fluids or the presence of it, to celebrate women's sensuality and pleasure.
I just have a question about process. Your hands are so tiny and so delicate. How many trial and error did it take to finally get beautifully detailed hands?
So the spirit wall with all those masks are kind of my trial and error, like practice ground. So I will make probably around like 50 of these for each piece that I create. Or I would say not always 50, but you know, like dozens. And that's when I get to kind of practice shapes and mostly surfaces. But then I also, like, some of them I really like, some of them I really don't like, but then it turns out like another person loves it. And so I kind of just see them again as like facets of femininity, of like, to some people, like one type of woman, like, you know, is like the end all be all, whereas like another person will find it completely offensive and unacceptable, and like, but honestly, like all of it is amazing. So yeah, that's kind of like these pieces have been where I test out like the look of certain things, and where I used to have a lot more where I had like a middle finger sticking out of them, but then I got better at making those little hands, and now instead of using that time to make these practice masks, I just stick it on the sculpture. Yeah.
I'm just curious if the creatures showed up in your dreams or in your daydreams, or if they just showed up when you were sculpting.
Oh, like these shapes? Man, I don't know. I'm a really deep sleeper. I don't get a lot of weird dreams. I wish I could tell you that I had these like mystical like messages from somewhere, but I think the place where that really happens to me is when I just like go in and start building stuff. Like even with this one, yeah, I guess like culture and like stories and movies and things like that have I think have a way bigger impact in me. So I think it comes from the outside than from within, or somewhere more mysterious. But yeah, I just started building this, and I think I made the head, and I was like, wow, this is such a great, like, stern, angry Asian face. And then I just was like Resistance Auntie's like stern face that she just like kept like a stone, you know, for that whole speech. And it kind of reminded me of like my moms, my aunts, these people who like sometimes will guide me with tough love, and they can just like keep that disappointed face for like so long. And then so then I was thinking, wow, like I'm just like so disappointed with everybody and everything and all of society right now. But I guess like if I keep this face and like hold my middle fingers up for long enough, like we'll work through it. Yeah.
Has your work that you know of ever been censored or rejected because of its direct use of body many of the world doesn't allow us to look at?
So far to my experience, besides for getting some like uncomfortable comments, I really haven't had to deal with much pushback. I think part of that is just because you know, like the interaction the artist gets is usually like in situations like this where people like make an effort on their part to come out to see my work. So I gotta assume they're interested or they like it. Or openings, same thing. When they're out in the world, the people who face the brunt of that sort of work and energy are like the people working the floor, you know, the security guards or the curators or whoever's looking at that email inbox. And so I've been lucky, I haven't had to deal with much. Also because, you know, I'm a Seattle artist, I've shown mostly here. This isn't the town that's gonna do that. So we'll see, yeah, as I keep making work like this, where it goes.
It sounds to me that your work, you start a piece and it evolves as you're working on it then. That you don't necessarily have a whole plan in place.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just, usually I will just, when I'm in between things, so like after this, I have kind of like another iteration of it in my head, like a chapter 2, maybe. So I do have some ideas for what I want to do, but like I think when I'm not focused on a specific concept, it's actually like a pretty scary and depressing time, and all I can do is just like, it's kind of like going to the gym. You just have to keep going, even though you don't feel great about it, and then eventually you hit something exciting, or like you feel like you're in good shape again, and then you can go after something. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for speaking today. I was wondering, because you said you mostly have drawn on Japanese texts and storytelling. Have you drawn on any other indigenous research and histories, oral histories?
Yeah, I definitely have. I like to read like folk tales and things, and then also in my research on the Jomon Venus, research on female characters who go to the underworld. Like they exist all over the world. I think the first one that's kind of like the Orpheus and Eurydice story is Inanna and her sister, whose name I can't remember right now. And it's an interesting one because it revolves around two women and like their sister relationship. But yeah, so I do like to research stories from all over the world and like find patterns. It's just that for me, I just get the most excited when I'm like reading or studying Japanese art and culture. And so it always ends up like looking like and taking on the aesthetic of Japaneseness, but it does come from everywhere. And even like, even these vessels, sometimes when I'm thinking about the next theme, like I'm a huge astrology nerd. And so sometimes I'll be like, I'm just gonna pick a sign, because there's 12. So, and see what, you know, what lessons are there and can also tie into, you know, a woman or feminine experience.
That was actually going to be my second question. If you used astrology in your work, because you were talking about the 12,
Yeah.
and I was thinking about that in terms of sign, and then underworld, all that. So that's very cool. Thank you.
Okay. Um, Thank you very much for today. I was wondering about the Venus chart that's kind of, the figures are all facing in and it's a more grayish color. And there's, yes,
Yeah.
that one. And so I was really wondering about the holes in the backs of all the figures and what the significance of that.
So this one I made, I call it My Friends, because I was thinking about the word and history of gossip. Like gossip now, it takes on like a really negative connotation. But I think it was like NPR, somewhere I heard this story about how originally the word came to mean like a group of women talking. And I was thinking about how like anytime there's a group of women talking, it's immediately met with suspicion and they're like gossiping, like they must be up to no good, you know? But then also I was thinking about like all of the, with the internet now, and people might call it cancel culture or call out culture and whatever, and there's, you know, good and bad sides of it, but there is an undeniably amazing side of it, where now we can create these like forums where people get together and talk and call out like abuse and try to get some sort of accountability and action taken to protect other women. And so this piece kind of celebrates the ability to come together and share information, sometimes just fun information, because like we should all also be allowed to chit chat and be up to no good. But also very useful information that can then be spread through these systems to other people who need to hear it.
And then I just was also wondering about in the masks, the big ones, that look like
Like string?
yarn,
Yeah.
or in the ears, yeah.
Yeah, so those are kind of, it's just a nod and a reference to the original Hanya masks, which, let's see, I can scroll back for a while. They are, you know, made using very elaborate silks and bands to attach to the actor's face. And so it's just kind of like borrowing from that design and aesthetic. But, you know, that the people, like, every piece of this mask is created by someone who dedicated their life and time and craft to making it. So, like, there are people who, like, you know, spin silk and make this fabric, and the rope is woven in a certain way. So it's kind of just a nod to it, but for me, I don't have that skill. So I just, like, diluted it down to, like, the simplest version of it I know, which is to make a very nice knot. And so that's what you're seeing.
So I've really loved learning about the personal, cultural, historical connection to everything. And I would never ask an artist what your favorite piece is, because I know that's like asking what's your favorite child. But I am curious, what was your most proud moment throughout this whole entire creative process, whether it be, you know, the way you worked the clay or made sure something didn't explode in the kiln, or, I mean, when did you have that aha moment where, you know, we just feel a lot of pride in what you're doing?
Yeah, that's a hard question, because I learned a lot through all of them. But, you know, honestly, like, one of my most proudest moments was getting my pieces back for this wall. Because, yeah, there's pieces that I've made that I feel very proud of, where I'm like, wow, I really, like, nailed it. This is, like, such a good design, and, like, you know, I feel like I've, like, flexed somehow. But with this wall, I just, when this show was opening, there was this wall that existed, and we were like debating like where would the text go, blah, blah, blah. And in previous places where I've been able to show my work, whenever I do show the spirits, I'm always like, they tend to look better in a group, because, curators will be like, well, why don't you just bring in like 6 or 7? And I'm like, I could, but I'm telling you, they look better when there's like 30. So like, give me as much wall as you can. And so when I got this whole wall, and at the time, I think I only had like maybe 50 spirits that I had to myself. And I only had like, I don't know how many months to make more. I knew I was not going to be able to make enough to fill this wall, but I knew there was enough that I have made that it existed. And it kind of just like depended on other people being interested enough to put in the effort and trust me enough to send back work that they paid for and then also expect to get it back. And so I just put it, I was kind of like playing with the idea for a long time because I was like, I don't know, it's gonna like put a lot of work on me or nobody's gonna respond and it'll be depressing. And so I finally decided to just ask on Instagram, like, because I sell them a lot on Instagram, like if anyone's bought a mask and would be interested in being part of my first museum exhibit, like it'd be great if you send it back. And then, yeah, I think I got like, I forget the final count, but it's something like 75 people or so who actually contributed back their masks. And the idea or the thought that like that many people like care enough to be excited for me and want to be part of this was just like, I don't know. That's my like biggest accomplishment that I feel from this show.
So I have 2 things. The first is to say thank you for this art as medicine, I guess is what I would call it. Like it's very moving. The reclamation of the feminine, and I don't know, it's just incredibly moving. And so that's the first thing, is just to say thank you. And secondly, I wonder if you, and know that I know this is a little personal, but have you experienced any personal healing through this process, through doing this kind of work? Has that, or was there an intention, or that's the general vibe? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first, like, in first renditions of giving these talks, like, the story of Izanami and Izanagi that I read is, like, wildly different from the actual original text. Like, I took a lot of liberties. That's not really how the interaction goes in the book. But I felt like when I first read this story, I felt like Izanami's story was very much just stuck in how it was written. And I kind of just saw it as like, she's sad and like she's stuck in the underworld and like, but the underworld could be exciting, right? Like, why don't I, if I knew about it, maybe I could be excited. But then as I was making the work, I kind of realized actually, like the whole story, like I tell people over and over again, was written by somebody who like doesn't know what the underworld is. They've never been there. Or if they've been there, it's just been like to have their own fun and they leave. They don't know the power of it. They're afraid of it. And so of course this is the version of the story that I have to work with. And so like, why am I so stuck up on this version when, like I've been trying to tell everybody else, like why can't I also believe that I can rewrite the whole story however I want? Because it's my story to rewrite. And so, yeah, I guess like while making this work and thinking about it and being able to like talk about it to so many people, and having conversations about it with like women who are very close to me and also very upfront with me, yeah, I was able to actually finally believe what I was telling everybody else, which is that whatever original story, depressing story of some woman being sad and like, and that being the end of her, just she's sad because it didn't work out anymore, is like made up by people who need women to feel that way. But that's not actually the reality at all. And if anything, if anything, she like got rid of something that was holding her back, and now she has this whole new story. In fact, she's built herself a whole new existence where this dude or any other does not have to exist at all. Like, she doesn't have to see or hear or like, there's nothing, because she has her own world. And then she can hang out with all these other incredible women down there and have the time of her life. And so, yeah, I've changed a lot through making the work. Yeah.
Thinking of those other incredible women, I'd love to hear some of the stories behind some of the war masks.
Yeah.
I'm specifically interested in the one with the beak. I don't remember the name, but it's a little different, so maybe a place to start if you want.
So the one with the beak, I actually based it on, the one with the beak is a little bit different because it was the one time that I tried to, instead of basing it off a Hanya mask, I was trying to base it off a Tengu mask, which are these like mythical creatures that are believed to be like half man, half crow. And they're these like incredible swordsmen that live up in the mountains, and they're just like super wise. And so I guess I was just thinking about like women who can just go off and conquer the wilderness and be completely on their own, and have every resource to defend themselves, both from the elements and then also like a wandering nuisance. Like with the Tengu, they always run into like monks, and like monks always talk about the Tengu because sometimes the Tengu will decide, all right, like you're okay, let me teach you some sword skills. And then the monks also become fighters, and sometimes they become like also Tengus. But then sometimes they just get killed, you know? So I was thinking about kind of like hermits and recluses and people who are just like just completely okay with being just alone and also like in the wilderness, like at one with nature.
Long walk, very sorry. Thank you so much for this. I'm just, seeing all these beautiful themes of community and self, obviously in the pieces where there's like my mother and there's all these, figures building up, but also just in my mother and the fact that I went to the Hungry Ghost Festival and was filled with community, and then in the spirit wall where community helped put the spirit wall together. And I'm wondering if there are other moments throughout this show where community was part of the process, and if there are, would you share those?
Yeah, I mean there's a whole other piece I built called Yomi, which was this which I built as like a portal to the underworld. It didn't quite fit in with the layout of the show here, so it's not included. But it's like a big crocheted piece, which I made during quarantine, and so we can only have gatherings outside, and I wanted to use it as a gathering place. And so I hung that under one of the electrical towers on the Chief South Trail, and had again, like a circle, like a gossip of women come together and hung out, and we shared poems and stuff like that. And so there are a lot of pieces like that where they're either inspired by groups or interactions that I was involved in, or they're like active, like the mother's piece in a specific like setting where I knew people were gonna be there together. I think what's also interesting too is like like throughout these 5 years, I've also had these pieces that are like dedicated to very specific people who I'm like no longer talk to anymore. And so there's also this like, you know, being a woman, it's sometimes very hard to love other women because of all this like internalized stuff that can come in between us. And so like friendships, like relationships, like lovers, like all of these things, there's all these boundaries between us to like love each other. And so sometimes like you can get past it, and then sometimes you have to part ways to figure that out for yourself. And so I guess I'm kind of like veering off from your question, but like, yeah, there's a lot, like many people who inspired and influenced and even like actively took part in this series of work. And I feel like through making these pieces, I'm still able to hold love for them and honor them, and you know, but yeah, I don't know. But yeah, that's my answer. Yeah.
First, thank you so much for this. Your work is incredibly powerful, and I agree, very moving. I wanted to ask a more casual question because you said you're an astrology fan. I wanted to know your big three.
Oh. My big three is I'm a Taurus sun, Scorpio moon, Scorpio rising.
One more question.
Anyone want to ask the last question?
Hi, my question was answered partially, but I would like to you if your art could be or what could be your message or guidance or enlightenment to men and women of this time where we are living?
That's a big question for a last question.
Well, it was the last question, huh?
But I think I would just like repeat like my biggest lesson from doing this work is knowing that like we're not given stories as women. We're not given stories that serve us and our well-being. And so like we need to actually take it upon ourselves, even though we've been taught like these stories, they exist in like every culture of the world, and they've been passed on for like hundreds of years. And so it feels very, very natural to just fall into like, that's how it's supposed to go. Like we have every right and every power to rewrite them as how we would like to see them and how we would like them to support us. And so, yeah, I think that's my ultimate lesson is like, don't rely on these stories. They can be fun and inspiring, and all of this art can definitely fuel me into making my own art. Like the Hanya mask is started from a story of a bunch of guys who got upset when women were upset with them, and they're like, oh my God, that's terrifying, like stop. Like that character must be shut down, and also must be like, it must be known to all women that when you get angry, it's really scary and we don't like it. That's what it looks like. Isn't that ugly? Like, that's what we're taught. But to me, I see that mask and I'm like, well, the message behind that mask does not make me feel good about myself, but actually it's like a really badass face. And you know what? I am that. I will be that. Sucks that you're scared, but it's really exciting for me to be that. And like, I'm gonna write stories about what I can do as that crazy demon. Yeah. So. Yeah. Being a crazy, unlawful demon woman is very exciting. That's my message.